Hello, Mr. Manuelium. I bring you another missive. This time I'm returned to drawing little guys with flat line art and colors because I got really tired of the painterly style. I thought that meant this would be shorter, but it's still like 20 minutes long, so... I guess full color just takes a long time, even though I'm cheating it out a bit with the colorized mask. You'll see that later, and quite a bit of copy-pasting. Let's see, lately I've mostly been really writing a lot of this Worm My Hero fanfic, which I realize that I spend a lot of these talking about fanfic, but the other two things I've recently read are, one, Lolita, which is not exactly casual conversation material, and two, I've been reading through Riot Medicine, which is just it's like a first aid guide that's framed specifically for the use of medics in, like, protests and, like, you know, riots, I guess. So, I'm not exactly expecting to become a doctor anytime soon, but I figured it's useful to know the sort of, oh, we need to go to a hospital symptoms. And, it's got some good little footnote jokes in there, but also doesn't exactly have a narrative to analyze, you know? So, fanfic it is. But yeah, for this fic, for some reason, usually when I write, like, long-form stuff, I get down my outline and then, like, sort of slowly chip away at it over the course of, like, a couple of weeks, usually. But for some reason with this one, I've just been, like, get my outline down, and then I, quite frankly, black out, and, like, look up again 6 hours later to find that I've written an entire chapter in one sitting, which I'm not really sure about what's happening here, but I'll take it, I guess. Yeah, I actually I've been rereading a lot of pieces of Worm for this fic, because I want to see what the original author did for a lot of places, because, you know, that's what I'm working off of, and, like, I don't know, it's both better and worse than I remembered. I do think that... Okay, I know I just said I wouldn't talk about Lolita, but I do think reading Lolita and then Worm in close conjunction made me really notice, like, because both of them are using first person to sort of obfuscate the fact that the main character is fucking insane. But honestly, Lolita just pulls it off so much better because, like, you know, Humber actually has horrid shit going on, whereas Taylor is, like, she is unreasonable and immature, but also, like, she's a teenager, what did you expect, you know? And also, like, there are points where I feel like Taylor is a teenage girl written by someone who was never a teenage girl. You get that sense a little bit, you know? I don't know if... I really know nothing about Worm's author. I think it's true, but I wouldn't want to assume. Either way, though, it does not convince me. And, like, although Taylor does some bullshit, you don't really... I don't think the first person really gets it across as well. Like, even when I was... Because I'm writing my little fic in first person because I want to practice first person and get better at it because I don't like it very much. And, you know, gotta challenge yourself in art. And so I was looking through, like, other fanfics that were using first person to see how they were doing it, and, like, even the other Worm fics are, like, I'm also, again, not convinced by them, of, like, there's something kind of... It's a style I associate a lot with, like, rationalist works, where the main character is curiously estranged from their own emotions, it feels like. They are emotional, but in the way that the narrative is written never makes me feel those emotions with them, you know? Like, there's a certain hard to pin down, like, flatness to them. If I'm being brutally honest about it, I think, like, a lot of those authors kind of have this implicit assumption about the world, I guess, or, like, worldview, that emotions are both irrational and either useless or somehow lesser than the beauty of cold logic, you know? And it just... There are some works, some styles that, like, really celebrate the emotion, really revel in the emotions of the characters. And the rationalists take the opposite approach, which, like, I don't think is invalid, but is... I mean, I do think it's stupid. I think anyone who thinks that, they're being very reasonable and logical and not at all emotional is usually, in fact, being extremely emotional, but they've blinded themselves to that fact. Anyway, this is getting off topic. Point is, I'm not convinced by Worm's first person, and like, especially in comparison to Lolita. And when I was going through fanfics for examples, I ended up, the one I liked the most was actually a My Hero fic that I had. I shan't devolve us into rambling about my analysis of this My Hero fic and why I think its structure moves too slowly, but point is, although I don't like a lot of parts of it, I do think it's quite well written on a technical level, and part of it is that, like, it's first person, but you almost don't notice it. Like, there's less I statements than you would think. Rather, it feels more like the character's sort of passively describing things, to sort of in that, like, mumbling to yourself kind of way. Like, it's very ponderous, and just kind of leans into that sort of vibe, which at first I was kind of leaning out of it with my writing, but then I was like, oh, this actually does work, so I can just do that. So that worked out. The second thing about rereading Worm was that I actually ended up reading a couple of excerpts from Ward, which is the sequel to Worm that I never finished because I didn't like it and didn't think it was worth finishing, but I might reconsider that stance because I was looking into a character and going through the citations in the Wikia, because those will cite to specific chapters, and one of them was citing to a chapter in Worm, and I was like, fucking Worm, or sorry, fucking Ward. But like, my main issue with Worm, to oversimplify drastically and cut out a whole other video essay, and the whole reason that I'm crossing over Worm with My Hero is that throughout the entirety of Worm, one of the biggest, most central sort of ideas is that no one cooperates with each other, no one helps each other out. Even teams are like, you rarely get the sense that these people like each other, and even more rarely do you get the sense that they would die for each other. There is no shonen anime power of friendship, which is like a valid way to write it, but not to my personal taste, so hence why I'm crossing it over with shonen anime ass My Hero. But yeah, a lot of both small and large plot things hinge off of the fact that characters simply will not work together in Worm. And part of how compelling it is that it gives everyone good reasons for why they wouldn't want to work together. But, you know. And then I read through one of the chapters in Ward, and like, the reason I fell off of Ward was actually also because of its first person, specifically because the parts of Worm's first POV that work for me is that, like, Taylor is a very desperate and very analytical thinker, especially in fights. Like, Worm really gets across the sense that whenever anyone gets into any kind of fight, you feel like, I need to know every single item in my pockets because I'm going to use every single one of them to press my advantage however I can. Throwing sand in your opponent's face is like basic shit here, you know? And like, you know, part of that is that Taylor has the power to control bugs and lives in a world where Superman exists, you know, and like has to fight that. And so you really get this sense of like really absolutely stressed sort of, we are constantly scraping by energy. I need to know where everyone in the room is. I know everything that I could possibly use as any kind of weapon or distraction or resource. And the thing is, Ward is from the point of view of Victoria Dallin, and she's basically Supergirl. Like, she's pretty obviously sort of like drawing inspiration from that archetype and like subverting in interesting ways, but also the thing is, when we read her point of view, it's written the exact same way that Taylor's is, at least to me, you know, it seemed. And I was like, Victoria Dallin has super strength. She can fly. She has an invincibility force field. I don't think she would fight in the same way that Taylor does. Like, there's still the same sense of, like, tactical thinking that, like, on one hand, like, Victoria is very smart and tactical in some ways, but, like, it felt like it should have been... I felt like if I read a chapter of Worm and a chapter of Ward side by side, even with all the names blacked out, I should be able to tell who's speaking, and I didn't think that was true. But the thing that the chapter of Ward that I did read really caught my attention, because it was much further in than I had ever gotten, was that it was about people trusting each other. Like, the characters were like, you know, had good reasons not to and were very traumatized, and I don't know if he'll subvert it later, but in that moment at least, like, multiple characters came together to be like, okay, you're my teammates, there's a lot of trauma responses and reasons that I don't trust you to do this, but I'm going to. I'm going to go with your idea, I'm going to let you go, I'm going to, you know, just like, and it's like, shit, man, if they actually hold that up, like, maybe I should read Ward. Like, that's exactly what I was looking for in there, you know? I had a very similar issue with the Magnus Archives where, like, there was a moment in the story, and I'm paraphrasing heavily here, but I remember there was a point where one of the characters was talking to the other and was just like, why are you doing this? You don't, like, none of you even like each other. And I was like, hang on a minute. That's true. None of you do like each other. Why are... It just felt very like I'm watching a bunch of people who are shitty be shitty to each other and have shitty things happen to them, and, like, that's just not compelling to me. Like, I am of the opinion that you always need... This is especially important in stories that are very sort of dark and depressing, is that you need little moments of, like, really bright happiness to have that kind of contrast. Because, like, whenever you just, like, really drive in on, like, terrible things are happening all of the fucking time, it becomes monotonous after a certain point. It becomes boring. It no longer has any emotional affect on the reader because they're used to it. Well, that can be effective if it's, like, if you're depicting, you know, specifically depression, or, you know, this is part of the character's arc of how they are sort of becoming emotionally dulled. For the most part, I think you need those moments of contrast. Like, in the Magnus Archives, I think I would have been more compelled if, like, the characters were closer-knit friends at the beginning, and then the fears and the darkness drove them apart. That would make it, you know, tragic. That would make it more emotionally potent. But instead it's like a bunch of office co-workers who never really liked each other in the first place, and so you don't get the sense that anything was lost here, you know? Like, characters are textually, they talk about how they used to be friends and stuff, but you never see it on screen, so you never really believe it. But yeah, that's... I have a lot of thoughts on narratives, in case you haven't noticed already. I also think that, to drag us back around to Worm, there's definitely a couple of parts where I'm like, now that I am trying to write my own story here, and I have the choice to change things, I'm like, some of these decisions were stupid. You made some stupid decisions, Wildbow, author of Worm. Specifically in, like... First of all, it was only until I started doing research and drawing out a map for my fic that I realized that the PRT and the Protectorate headquarters are in different places in the city. They're two separate locations, which, like, I had never gotten that impression from my reading. I thought they were all everything was happening on the Protectorate headquarters, which is on a oil rig out in the bay. 'Cause, like, you know, that's a cool place for the heroes to operate out of. And, like, in the world building, it makes sense that the PRT and the Protector are separate. They are supposed to be separate branches that, like, do the government checks and balances thing against each other. In practice, of course, this does not work, but, like, you know, it is supposed to work like that. And I think the failure of it is itself compelling, and true to, you know, bureaucracy. But, like, on a textual level, it's like, you put a really cool Hero HQ thing out in the oil rig that has its own force field, and you don't do anything there. Like, I realized that retroactively, a lot of the scenes that I'd assumed happened on Protector HQ actually happened in the PRT, which is just like a normal-ass building in downtown Brockton Bay, and it's like, well, that's way more boring. Like, come on! You built a superhero base and you were not using it! Ugh. And, like, once I looked into it, I'm like, how do you even get to the Protector HQ? It is out in the middle of the ocean. And it's like, oh, we have a hard light force field bridge that opens up, and it's like, if I were designing this, which I now am, we're going to be using helicopters. There's a helicarrier pad on top. Like, that's a stupid way to do it. have to turn on the goddamn force field generator every time you do your daily commute for, like, however many employees there are? Because, like, they never mention any housing on there, and so oil rig, I assume you don't have, like, that much space for people to be living in there. So theoretically, there is a minimum amount of, like, custodial staff and, like, administrative staff who need to be going in and out of that place, along with all of the actual heroes who work there. So this is logistically stupid. Also, it is presumably pretty far out in the bay. You have to drive for a second, and at that point just take a fucking boat, you know, like, anyway. It just, neither of them make logistical sense of, like, the wards are in the PRT, but world building wise, they are a part of the Protectorate branch, I'm pretty sure, so. But on the other hand, like, the wards are the, you know, the teenage superheroes, they're the, you know, the Teen Titans spoof. And so, theoretically, they are going to school every day, so you don't want them to have to cart all the way out to the Protectorate HQ in the middle of the bay on a daily basis while spending half their day in school. Like, that's also stupid. It's bad no matter how you cut this. And just, like, coordinating things between the two offices, ugh. I genuinely think the author might have just fucked up somewhere and, like... But yeah, like, there's something really compelling to me about the Protectorate out on the oil rig. Like, a really beautiful sort of headquarter base that is, like, visible from all parts of the coast of the city. But also, you know, the obvious symbolism is that they are separated, they are far apart from the people, they are disconnected from the city that they are protecting, you know? And, like, yeah, that's some basic literary 101 writing. Hell yeah. You should do things on the Protectorate HQ. You should hang out there and, like, set scenes there in this cool place that you've built. Hello? What? And it gets destroyed, like, pretty early on in the story, which, like, is why I didn't notice, I think. Yeah, I'm not very compelled by it. Also, like, okay, this is deeply revealing as to how I think about world building and stories and drawing maps, and how much of a pedantic bitch I am, but when they describe the Undersider's base, like, they're in this abandoned factory building that they've taken over the second floor of, and, like, 3 of the 4 members, like, live there full time, and, the way it is described is, like, okay, you have, like, this really open place that's, like, there's no, like, ceiling except for the roof, so that's, like, really high above, and the rooms that Lisa and Alec are staying in are, like, they're described as, like, cubicles, like, the walls do not go all the way up to the ceiling, they're just, like, you know, kind of open-aired in that way, and, like, in between the 2 rooms is the bathroom, and, like, when I first read Worm, I was like, okay, sure, and, like, just kept reading, and did not think about it. But now that I'm like, okay, I want to actually... Place is very important to me in writing, and I want to give the characters an actual proper, like, home base. We're going to be hanging out here. I want to actually have, like, a good sense of where things are in this place. And I was like, now that I'm thinking about it and have control over the layout of this place, why would you put the bathroom there? That's stupid. The characters are living in this place, so presumably it has, like, you know, an actual shower and stuff. And, like, you don't want that shit to be open-aired on top. You're going to get steam fucking everywhere. Everyone's going to hear every time you take a dump. Like, it's going, like, there is no... Don't put the bathroom there. That's a stupid place to have it. Just stick it, like, anywhere else in the building. I'm infuriated by this. But yeah, that is unfortunately the way I think about this bullshit. I always want to keep an eye out, both in writing and drawing, for, like, is this reasonable as an actual place for somebody to live? Does it actually contain, like, the amenities and the resources and, like, arranged in a way that, like, oh, the things I'm going to use daily are actually close at hand? Or is it just, like, stupid and aesthetic? Which, like, not entirely invalid, but for a story like this, I want the home base to actually be a home base that we can hang out in, and, you know, also that way if I choose to destroy it, it actually holds like an emotional weight of like you actually lost your home, not just we lost the place that we theoretically hang out in but never do so in on screen. Most recently there's a fight scene that I need to write, and I think this is the first time I've written such a extremely long fight scene. I did black out and just knock the whole thing out in 6 hours straight, but I need to go back and edit it, because like I was writing and I was like, wow, it feels kind of weirdly difficult to keep track of everyone in this scene. I wonder why that is. And then like I finished writing and stepped away, and like as soon as I stepped away for like 0.5 seconds, I was like, hang on a minute. There's 10 characters here. That's too many characters here. Why the fuck are there 10 people here? And like Original Worm, it's like there are 13 characters in there, and I'll tell you right now, they do not get equal amounts of screen time, and it's like, it's just too much to keep track of, especially since my instinct would be to partition them off away from each other, but this all takes place in like one open space, and it's just so many people to keep track of. And like, if some of them were just like extras who were like doing generic like cannon fodder shit, that'd be fine, but because they're all like named characters with superpowers that you have to deal with, it's like, it's so much. Ugh. Anyway, that takes us to our time limit, I believe, so I'll catch you next time.